Hello to all of you. Welcome to a few episodes on Households of Glory that we're just going to run throughout the summer. A few episodes specifically for worship and how do we enable households to worship during this really strange time. And my name's Luke. I'm the worship pastor here at Chanctonbury Church, and I've just got a few episodes lined up with interviews with some dear friends of ours, as well as some stuff that Claire, my wife, and myself are just going to bring to you as a church, but also wider for those of you who aren't familiar with our church. But just to kick off, this first episode is an interview with a dear friend of ours, actually dear friends, Paul and Sue Manwaring. Are kind of adopted spiritual parents of ours, and they've adopted us as sons and daughters, as a son and as a daughter, and of course they get an extra grandson, Albert, our son. But we're so excited to show him off to you. Paul is one of the senior leaders at Bethel Church, founder of Global Legacy, heavily involved, pivotally involved in Awakening Europe. And him and his family reside here in Windsor in the UK. His passion is to see Europe saved and the UK saved. And Paul has seen us, myself and my wife, been with us through the highest moments of our lives, and they've also walked with us through every step of some of the most tragic moments of our lives as well. So they're very dear to us. Very important people, and it's our honor and our privilege just to showcase him in an interview, a Zoom styled interview with you, which I really hope you enjoy. So get a pen and paper, get ready to write down some fantastic notes. The whole idea of these episodes is just to give you great nuggets of food, of encouragement, of inspiration, just to feast on over these summer months. That is the aim. So sit back, enjoy this video, and I'll see you on the other side. So, everyone, welcome. Everyone, this is a very special person in my life, Paul Manwaring. Paul, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Yep, I'm doing all right.
Good.
It's a little warm today, but I'm doing good.
It is really warm. I'm not complaining though. I suppose I'm quite happy that it's hot. So everyone, this is so Paul and his wife Sue are very special to Claire and I. They've we lived with them in our third year and had basically the best coffee every single morning waiting for us, waffles every morning for breakfast for the most part. It was amazing. We got really close, and Claire, my wife, interned for Paul in Global Legacy. Was she any good?
She's great, yeah.
She had a great year actually. So yeah, Paul and Sue have they've walked with us through the best moments of our lives and some of the tragic moments of our lives. So they're very dear to us. We love them a lot, and I just thought I'd bring him on to show him off to you guys. We've been doing a series at the minute, for those of you who are new to this, on Households of Glory. And I'm the worship pastor of Chanctonbury Church, down in the middle of who knows where, between Horsham and Worthing, in between those areas. And I've been sort of looking at how we can enable households within this time within worship. So Paul, I mean, do you have any sort of insights on that? Because at the moment, I mean, the restrictions are lifting at the moment, but for the most part, we are having to do stuff in households. So, I mean, what have you guys been doing where you are, I suppose, to start off with?
I think that this all comes into the category of, for all of us, we need to learn how we do our Christian life. What does that look like for me? And obviously you're a worship leader, so this conversation has the worship edge. But how do you do your Christian life anyway? How do you do your reading the Bible, spending time in prayer? How do you do that? And so I suppose what's happened is that this lockdown has caused us to face ourselves to some extent over a number of things. And anyone who knows me knows that what I never want to do is I never want to present an unachievable, unattainable Christian life. I've never liked it. I think it's one of the great dangers of the pulpit that we can stand and present a Christian life which isn't attainable for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes as leaders we have privilege in our lives. We have opportunity to do things, to live a different way. So my goal would always be, how can I help you be the best you can be? And in this conversation, that's worship. Now, if I happen to be, Luke, or somebody who, Bill Johnson, who plays the piano, and has a nice grand piano in his house, I might be the guy that sits at the grand piano and plays worship. But I'm not that guy, and you probably don't want me walking around the house singing and worshiping. So that's not been my expression. I can guarantee you this, for a long time in my life, I would say there's rarely a day where there isn't worship on, in the form of music. But anything that we rely on can become a barrier to us really experiencing God for ourselves. So if I rely on any pattern, any system, any prop, I might be in trouble. So it falls into that category. If anyone's on here who listens to Bethel TV, Chris Cruz, young man, runs our college age and above tribes ministry in Bethel, and he preached Sunday morning on Father's Day, and it was genius. And it had a piece of this in there. It had the okay, don't get locked into something. Create some space and see where you go. So that's where I would always start. Is you got to find it for you.
Yeah, that's so good. I feel like in this time, even personally, just a lot has shifted in my heart, because for the longest time, especially at the start of all this, going out shopping was pandemonium, and it was almost like apocalyptic, and I think for me, God just became really real, because it felt like there was so much fear and uncertainty in the air, and it felt a little bit uncomfortable. And I was just, Claire and I would talk with others, and just think that God is either real or he's not, and we believe he's real, and it feels like there's in a way, a resetting happening, and it feels like there's so much shifting. I mean, I think a quote from Jeremy Riddle, I won't do it justice, but he said, cleansing the temple has never been more necessary. And I certainly feel like for us here in our sort of community down here, that we've really taken a deep dive into the heart of God, into our own hearts, to what really, really matters, and having to rethink things that we've maybe done as a community, as a church, and to look at what God is saying and to try and hear him in this time. And what we've been doing, I think as church, we've been doing some like pre-recorded streaming stuff. But even that, we're conscious of just churning out, just as the thing you're talking about, just a system, and I think that we really want to try and encourage households to gather as families, and to press into the Lord together as a family. And I think that for us, looking at Nehemiah, I don't know if you want to touch on this bit, but I heard sort of Chris talking about leaders, but he said the reason that the wall was built so quickly, one of the reasons was you had to build the bit of the wall where your house was, because it meant you were invested in it, and everyone in the household worked together. And I think that's a great picture for this time. Stealing something from Lou, James's wife here, our vicar, she said, if you want to see healing happen, we need to see it happen in our home first. Or if we want to see God really break out in revival, then we need to see it in our home first. So I don't know if that sort of, if you want to touch on any of what I've just said.
Well, I mean, I think we've got to make sure that we don't end up worshipping the event or the song, or the experience, you know. And now you know me, so you know that I love worship. I love worship music. I was, one of my favorite things to do in life is to close worship in a meeting. I probably enjoy that as much, if not more, than preaching sometimes. So all of that, I'm there, and I'm an encourager of worship leaders. You could contact a bunch of them, and they would tell you that I've encouraged them from before anyone knew who they were. I've encouraged some of them. But what I would say is we've got to make sure that we're not kind of dependent on having some songs in order to experience God. I mean, having some songs might be how we experience God. But, you know, when I actually think about it, and there was a funny comment, I'm trying to think what the context was. It might have been listening to Chris Cruz, you know, and, you know, he was just talking about having patterns of things. And, you know, he basically joked and said, don't be opposed to that. After all, the worship team choose the songs you sing on Sunday, and you don't complain about that. So I think we just got to make sure that we allow ourselves to find him, and to be found by him, to be present, which is one of my things about public worship is, you know, what's the purpose of public worship? And some people would say it's to usher in the presence of God. Well, he's already here. So I think that actually one of the primary goals of public worship and the worship leader is to usher in the presence of the people to the presence of God. I'm not saying that he doesn't sometimes manifest more than others. I'm not saying that sometimes we're more aware of his presence if there's a lot of us together. But really the goal is for me to be present. Yeah. So I think that we're all on a journey of learning how to be present, and that might involve singing. Now, you know, I've been thinking a little bit just lately about Acts 2:40, that, you know, they were in each other's house every day. There's no worship there's no band in the Acts 2 church. So that's why it was important for me to say, I love worship. I love worship leaders. It's part of my life. I want that. But let's make sure that we actually know what it is that we are trying to find. Again, you're still thinking through from my life, and then some of what I was listening to and reference with Chris Cruz, which I can't recommend highly enough. It was a profound message. Is, you know, sometimes I think we get caught up in, say, Bible reading, we get caught up in quantity. So, you know, we're plowing through, but actually probably one good verse will set you up for your day if you left pondering your one verse, you know. So we happened to yesterday be talking about Sue's dad. Sue's dad died when she was, you know, 16 years of age, same like my dad died when I was young. And we were just talking, and I said, oh, your dad's verse, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. And I was sitting down reading this morning, and I went to it. I went to that verse. And so I think you can do the same thing with a song. I think I don't, you know, we're in our home. You're probably not going to find me. You know me, you're not going to find me standing in my room, in my living room, you know, hands raised for 45 minutes like I do in Bethel Church. but you will find that every day there is music coming through a couple of pretty decent speakers, actually, which is an important part of my life. So, and it may well just be that I've just got that. I've just got one line, something that was going on today that I was involved in, and involving someone else. And just Sue said, look, just tell him this is how I fight my battles. What is that song about? This is how I fight my battles. Presence. This is how I fight my battles. I'm surrounded. Presence. So I think it's that. I think we've got to make sure that we don't lock ourselves in to, we have to sing so many songs. We have to do this. We have to do that. So that would be a piece of it. And I would say what's really important is keep it simple. It's hard for us not to reference Bill Johnson. You and I will reference him for the rest of our lives. Bill Johnson happens to be able to sing and was a worship leader when he was up at Weaverville, up at that church. And very often I've been in church when he's preached, and you probably have as well. And he's closed his own preach and he stood at the front and he's sung a cappella.
Yeah.
I can tell you this, his son has written some of the best songs that we're singing today, but I've never heard Bill sing one of those songs a cappella. Yeah. Why? Because he goes to what's in his heart.
Yeah.
And he'll typically, interestingly, goes to some Hillsong. And he'll stand and he'll lead us in that. So I think it's very important that we're connecting, which is really links to the point that you talked to me about and I referenced. And I think this might be the most important thing maybe in our Christian lives, in our meditation journey, whether it's how we're dealing with our emotions or how we are worshiping. And that is, you have to find your voice.
Yeah.
You have to find your voice. And what's interesting, actually, if you think about it, the whole thing with Moses was, this is my theory. My theory is that the staff was the fallback for Moses's voice, because God wanted Moses to speak, and he said, "I can't speak." He said, "Well, there's a staff." And actually, I think that it was his failure to trust the voice in the future that caused him to be known as being disobedient. We could talk about that. But so there's the example I use from Bill is, and I'd heard him teach this, read the Psalms until you find your voice. If you're going through anything, pain, anxiety, fear, any of that. It was a great message until January 23rd, 2008, when it became a part of my life, because I was diagnosed with cancer, sat on a hotel bed with a bad news and said, what would Bill do? He'd read the Psalms until he found his voice. And so I sat on a bed and I read the Psalms until I found my voice. And actually, that voice carried me for the next 3 months. That one thing I read that night carried me for 3 months. And I've never forgotten it. So I've been thinking about that. I haven't done this every day. I don't want anyone to think, because it's got to be achievable. But I went for a bike ride a couple of weeks ago, and I don't do that every day either. I wish I did. And I took myself on a journey, and I talked to myself about God, about my victories, about the testimonies, about how I've seen him through my life. And I went from actions and testimonies to character of God. And then I began to thank him for, you're faithful. You've never let me down before. You're good. And before about 15 minutes was over, I was in a very bad version of spoken word, in terms of you couldn't record it, but a very good version of me worshiping.
Wow.
So I think you have to find your voice.
Yeah.
Who is he? What has he done? What character is that? Who is Jesus to you? And before you know it, you're going, you're my savior, my friend, my redeemer, you're my deliverer, you're everything to me. You can have it all. And before you know it, you're there. Wow. So I think it's I would say, if I might have rambled a little, but I think it's keep it simple, make it personal, find your voice. Don't allow yourself to be trapped into it has to look like someone else. It has to be mine.
Yeah.
And you might hear me singing one line. You might hear me finding a line out of the Beatles that turns into worship. You might find one verse. You could find anything, but it will be there.
Wow.
Somewhere in my day.
Thanks for that. I never knew that about when you're sitting on the hotel bed, hearing the bad news and reading a psalm that got you through a difficult time. I never knew that. I've got a similar story, and Albert is a product of that. Just, I think, trying to put my shoes into someone who maybe isn't musical, or maybe doesn't really sing, and just as you were talking, and I think that, which is difficult for me to do because music's been part of my life for all of it, and it's a huge connection point for me, but
what I'm not doing, I'm not questioning
Yeah.
the value of that for anybody.
Yeah.
If I was a keyboard player, you'd find me playing the keyboard.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what's interesting is I think here we have been given one of the great opportunities to live out something we say, because what we'll say is worship is more than singing, and the language of the people of Israel is that worship was serving.
Yeah.
And your work is worship. So when God said to Moses, you'll know it's I that sent you when you come back to this mountain and worship me, he didn't say, bring your guitar. So what was he saying? He was saying, you'll know it's I that sent you when you come back to this mountain and serve me. And here's what I believe. And I experienced this. I preached a message and I experienced something in the message that I'd never experienced as I preached. And that was because what I think that verse means is this: you'll know it's I that sent me, I that sent you, because as you worship, you will see the I in you that reflects the I in him.
Wow.
And that becomes worship.
Yeah.
If I can believe that what I do, the I in me reflects the I in him, that's worship.
Yeah.
And just the same as little Albert, as he grows up, will mimic you. It's don't get it the wrong way, but it is worship.
Yeah.
It's a little boy worshiping his dad and copying and mimicking.
Wow.
And we get to do that in a different way, in a more holy, reverent way. But if I'm a doctor and I just saved someone's life, and I'm able to stop in that moment and realize I am is reflecting the I am healer in him.
Wow.
And that becomes worship. So I think we've been given this great opportunity in this season of really testing this out and really realizing actually it's true.
Yeah.
It is true. It is worship. Reading the Bible, reading a verse is worship. Singing a song is worship.
Yeah.
And as you know, probably one of the funnest things that's happened for us in this, whatever now is 13 weeks, is every week, every Sunday night, we've made our neighbor a pizza. And they're good pizzas.
Good.
And that's important. That is important. But, today our neighbor just wanted to talk to Sue and was just talking through some of the challenges that he's got as this man in his 70s with a sick wife. And that man 18 months ago probably wouldn't have had anything to do with us, and now he's saying, please don't move. And it's not just for the pizza. Well, that pizza is worship. I mean, you could worship the pizza, but that pizza has become an expression of worship.
Yeah.
Because what would Jesus do? He'd make his neighbor a pizza.
Wow. Yeah.
So I think we just need to blow this whole thing up.
Yeah.
I think as we come back into the corporate setting, of course we're looking forward to singing, but let's not get too upset because we can't sing at the moment because it might spread the virus more. Let's realize that actually there's a lot more to this, and maybe we're about to find out something. Maybe we're going to step into something that is incredibly exciting. So.
Wow. Paul, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I really connect with that. I think in a huge way. I think it's Charles Finney, the revivalist, and he described it. I love these words, but he said that when he was filled with the Holy Spirit for the first time, it was like all he wanted to do was pour out the gushings of his heart. And I love that.
Like he would say.
Yeah, I love that because I really resonate with that. And I think especially the last 3 years, just pouring out what's in my heart, even if it's raw or dirty or out of tune or whatever it might be that I have at my disposal, whether it is cooking a great meal for my family or whatever it might be. That's amazing. Paul, thank you so much for jumping on.
You're welcome. Good to hang out with you. Achievable, accessible Christianity is what we must create.
Yeah.
And that's a passion.
Yeah.
And you guys can help a lot with that, with worship.
Yeah.
And especially by giving us lyrics. So yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yeah.
I love you, as you know. So
yeah,
like a son.
Thank you so much. And yeah, guys, thanks for tuning into this. I really, really hope that you've written some notes or something. Keep it simple. Make worship make God the gospel accessible. All of that amazing stuff. Paul, thank you so much. You're a massive hero of mine. And it's been such a privilege to show you off to my family down here as well. So guys, that's enough from us. Households of Glory. Tune in for the next episode and speak to you soon. Love you guys. That was absolutely amazing. That was so incredible. I really, really hope that inspired you, that encouraged you, and more importantly, that just instilled hope in your lives. Now, if you're familiar with our church and with Paul, that's fantastic, and that might even have added to stuff that you've heard before. But if this is so new to you, just let that encourage you, let that instill hope in your life, and especially during this season of uncertainty, in this lockdown season, let it bless you, let it inspire you, and just take it away, take it and adapt it to your life, to where you're at home, to the church that you go to, and just really let it bless you. In our next episode, Claire and I are just going to look at the topic of what is worship, which is a huge topic in and of itself, but we're just going to pick out little bits in that just as extra food to feast on during this time. So stay tuned and look forward to seeing you then.